What's going on, peeps? Brandon Bailey here, checking here with CBS Sports HQ, along with the fellas here, Jonathan Jones, here, NFL writer, and the champ here as well, Bryant McFadden. Of course, we're getting close to that off-season mode for a lot of teams, looking to kind of restructure the roster as well as maybe look towards a draft. But some might want to keep tabs of their own in 2022 with that franchise tag. Before we get into it, fellas, I want to take a look at those numbers when it comes to projections, the franchise tag. You see the values there. I heard that, B-Mac. The QB's always getting paid, starting at 29.5 there. Then you got to bring in the linebackers or wide receivers when it comes to divvying out 18.5. Outside of that, you have the quarterbacks and defensive ends checking it at 17.5. And per usual, the kickers and punters, no love there, just a little bit at $5 million when it comes to that tag. So, JJ, I want to start with you. If we're looking at Green Bay, and you see that number for wide receivers there, Davante Adams, obviously you might want to keep Aaron Rodgers happy. Are they playing tag here with Adams?
I think that there's no question that they are playing tag here with Davante Adams. And Brandon, B-Mac, we want to make clear, we don't love the franchise tag, right? We want guys to get paid. We want them to have job security. And yes, the franchise tag is guaranteed money for just 1 year, but these guys hate the franchise tag. They want to get long-term deals. There's no question about it. But as it relates to the Green Bay Packers, what are they looking for? Well, they don't want Davante Adams to go into free agency. And so you're going to see a number of lists coming out here in the next couple of weeks about top free agents. And Davante Adams is going to be at the top of that list, certainly as it relates to his position. He's not going to be a free agent. The Green Bay Packers aren't going to allow that to happen. So we see the projected numbers right here. The Packers are not in a good salary cap situation, but you don't let a top 2 wide receiver just walk. And so they very likely are going to tag Davante Adams and figure out the rest later. I don't think that this is going to happen particularly soon. They can do it as early as February 22nd, as late as March the 8th. And I think it's going to be closer to March the 8th than it would be February 22nd. Will Davante Adams try to get out of Green Bay? Will he try to join Aaron Rodgers if Aaron Rodgers goes somewhere else, or if he retires? All of that is to be seen, and because of that, it's really difficult to project exactly what's going to happen, but it is almost impossible to imagine that the Green Bay Packers are going to allow Davante Adams to become a free agent in mid-March, and that ultimately they would just get a third-round compensatory pick for him. The other thing here is, well, if you make him a free agent or if you don't tag him, what would you do with him? You would sign him to a long-term deal. Well, he's going to want to be paid as the highest-paid wide receiver in the NFL. That would be DeAndre Hopkins' money at around $27 million, which is about a $10 million gap between the franchise tag and that average annual salary. So they're a long way away from that. They're a long way away from figuring things out. And because of those reasons, a tag is very likely for Davante Adams.
Yeah, I agree with you, JJ. I think, I don't think I know. He is the most important player not named Aaron Rodgers for the Green Bay Packers. And even if you lose Aaron Rodgers, they're a better team. They're a better offense with number 17 in the lineup. So worst case scenario for the Green Bay Packers, worst case scenario for Davante Adams, they will tag him. But you better believe they will continue to try to negotiate. But if they can't get anything done with a new contract extension, he will be in a Green Bay Packers uniform for sure in 2022.
You see those numbers here when it comes to receiving touchdowns since 2014, right behind Mike Evans. But of course, if you want to keep A-Rod there, you might want to have Adams back in that Green Bay uniform there. All right, JJ, J.C. Jackson, shutdown quarter for the Patriots, had 8 interceptions this past season. Are they playing tag with him?
I think so. I think this is a guy who, and B-Mac can speak about how great of a defender he is, but certainly in man coverage, he's been that dude, right? And they allowed Stephon Gilmore to walk. They traded him to the Carolina Panthers. They need a corner there. And so are they ultimately going to, again, sign him to a long-term deal, or are they going to tag him, or are they going to let him walk in free agency? Again, walking in free agency does not appear to be an option, no matter what their cap situation is. And right now they have about $5 million in cap space. They can restructure guys. They can get to about $33 million just by restructuring guys. That's not including cutting people or any of the more complicated cap maneuvers. But he just played last year on the second round tender at about $3.4 million. That was a steal. And I thought that a team might actually try to grab him at that second round tender and get something up for him. But he played under that, and he had a heck of a season. We see right there, led has led the league in interceptions since 2018 and was a second-team All-Pro. So the Patriots aren't going to let him out of the building. Again, the tag can always be a placeholder. Just because somebody is going to be tagged here in the next couple of weeks does not at all mean that by week 1 they are playing under that tag. Hopefully, for the sake of these guys, they can get those long-term deals taken care of. That deadline, of course, is the middle of July.
The thing about JC that I love, he's the ultimate number 1 corner. He can follow opposing offense's best wide receiver and shut them down or make it very, very difficult for them to be productive. You talked about the number over the last 4 years. He leads the NFL in interceptions. He has 25. But get this, in those same 4 years, he's had 53 PBUs. I mean, this is a guy that has gotten his hands on 78 footballs throughout the course of a 4-year span. That's big-time production. Had 8 interceptions. A year ago was second in the National Football League, had 23 PBUs. He was first in the NFL a year ago. He's done nothing but exceed the expectations. So outside of what he brings to the table for them, for the Patriots individually as a skilled player, but what about what they have going on in their division? Right now, every team in the AFC East, they're chasing Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. And don't forget who Josh Allen primary wide receiver is, Stephon Diggs. So if you're the New England Patriots, you already allowed Stephon Gilmore to walk because you had J.C. Jackson. You cannot do the same because you don't have another player that is anywhere close to being the player that J.C. has been throughout his 4-year span there in New England. And if you want to have any success against Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, you find a way to keep him in uniform. And worst case scenario, that will probably be via franchise tag.
The latest DB to perform there in a Pats uniform, Talon and Asante Samuel, just to name a few there when it comes to that secondary. Let's stay on that side of the field here. Cincinnati, Jessie Bates, the last member we have of him picking off Stafford in the Super Bowl in that early half there. JJ, your thoughts on him maybe sticking around in Cincy?
I don't think there's any question that he's going to be a Cincinnati Bengal in 2022. It's just a matter of if he's going to be under contract for that year and that year alone via the franchise tag, or if they can reach a long-term deal with Jessie Bates. You look at the Cincinnati Bengals roster, and they wouldn't tag C.J. Uzomah. They like him at tight end, but he's 2 years removed from that Achilles. It's probably a little too much for him. Larry Ogunjobi, if he had continued on the season that he had in that prove-it year without getting injured, maybe he could be the guy. The only guy that they would tag is Jessie Bates. But here lies the rub. You have Jessie Bates, who frankly played himself into a contract extension last offseason, and he was upset that he didn't get one. Remember, the Bengals paid his draft classmate Sam Hubbard, but didn't pay him, and he talked throughout the season about how that was in his mind, and that led to some poor play before he finally put it in the back seat and said, okay, let me go play my football. We see the tag right there at $13 million. The Cincinnati Bengals, if they are going to ultimately sign him to a long-term contract, really the floor is going to be Budda Baker's contract, the one that he signed with the Arizona Cardinals. That's the floor. And we can argue about whether Jessie Bates is a better safety. He certainly doesn't have the accolades just yet as Budda Baker, but that's the way that this stuff works. And so because Cincinnati historically has been a cheap franchise, and now they're going to have to spend money. They have $56 or so million in cap space. They're very likely going to be cutting Trey Waynes. That's going to open up another $10 million. So for the sake of round numbers, let's say that they're going to enter free agency with around $70 million in cap space. We know that they're going to allocate a lot of that to the offensive line and some free agents, but they're going to have to earmark $14 million for Jessie Bates for that tag. Can they come to an agreement on a long-term deal before that? To be determined. And frankly, I think that Jessie Bates, and I know that Jessie Bates thinks that he should be getting that long-term deal, but it seems like these two sides are destined for the tag, and they will continue to work out and hammer out a long-term deal as we get into July.
Yeah, I don't see Jessie Bates going anywhere from a second-round pick out of Wake Forest. You talked about the year he had this past season. Clearly wasn't the same production that we saw in 2020 when he did a phenomenal job, not just tackling, but picking opposing quarterbacks off. But what he means to their defense, he's the quarterback of the defense. He's the guy that communicates and gets everyone lined up. And I love the relationship that he has with fellow safety Von Bell, a guy who they acquired over a year or so ago from the New Orleans Saints. So you want to keep those things intact. This is a team that's clearly right there. They're in win now mode based on the success they had this past season, along with the players that are returning. especially at the quarterback position in Joe Burrow. So keep everything intact. Do not allow Jesse Bates to walk and take his talents to another organization. So they may have to tag him, but I do believe, based on the numbers that you mentioned, JJ, when it comes to the cap space availability, they should be able to get something done. And that should be a necessity for Cincinnati, knowing that this is a guy you drafted. He's exceeded the expectations. He's done nothing but been productive. And most importantly, he means a lot. And he's a great locker room guy as well.
Of course, Bates there, as you mentioned, one of those key pieces, the reason why they're in the Super Bowl in that secondary, and, of course, others on the other side of the ball there. Kansas City, they fell a little short there. Orlando Brown was part of that KC shuffle up front there, JJ. Chances he comes back because it's 16.5 if they want to keep him there.
Yeah, and they're going to have to figure out their cap situation. They know that. Of course, they're going to convert the roster bonus to a signing bonus for Patrick Mahomes. That was built into that, $500 million deal or whatever he signed a couple of years ago. But Orlando Brown, listen, you don't trade a first-round pick just to get him for a year and then let him walk in free agency. Again, and this can't be repeated enough, the tag can be a placeholder for these guys. You would have to imagine that the Kansas City Chiefs, Brett Veach, and his fantastic front office group there have understood that this time was going to come. Orlando Brown would be a pending free agent. And so you'd have to imagine that the two sides have worked together on what a potential long-term deal would be. His play has allowed him to earn a long-term deal. What that exactly looks like, I'm sure the Chiefs want to come in a whole lot lower than Orlando Brown and his representation want to come in at. But the point being, as we have talked about throughout the show, you can't let him go be a free agent. You can't give away a first-round draft pick, albeit the next to last first-round draft pick in last year's draft, just to get him for a season. And so because of that, because of what you gave up for him, you have already said, okay, well, we are at least tagging him in 2022. So I would expect that to happen unless, of course, as I mentioned, these two sides have been working together quietly in the background behind closed doors the last couple of months. And I wouldn't at all be surprised to see that a deal has been hammered out. I would certainly be shocked if he walks. He will not walk. He will be with the Chiefs in 2022.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, JJ. You don't trade for a player give a first rounder up just to rent him for 1 year. Not to mention he's protecting your star quarterback blind side, the left side. Did a pretty good job in doing so, still in the prime years of his career. You find a way to get a job done. The tag could be a placeholder, like you said, but I think this is a guy, when you look at all the free agents the Chiefs have on both sides of the football, he has to be the number one priority when it comes to finding a way to get him an extension.
See it right there, of course, at left tackle, as you guys mentioned, you just don't throw them away, and those guys just don't grow on trees every day when it comes to protecting the blind side of most QBs across the league. Dolphins tight end Mike Gesicki. We kind of remember a lot of the one-handed catches there. Of course, one of those targets for Tua. If you're looking into the future, JJ, is he there in 2022?
I think absolutely. Mike McDaniel, the new head coach there, has already talked about it, and frankly, very likely got the job because he said, I'm going to be the guy for Tua. Well, if you're going to be the guy for Tua, make sure that you keep his weapons around. Obviously, Jalen Waddle is going to be a big part of that Miami Dolphins offense moving forward. Probably going to see him used in a more horizontal way, maybe a touch of Deebo Samuel. But keep your strength strong. You got a great pass-catching tight end in Mike Gesicki, and you got $64 million in cap space. Frankly, even if you didn't really care to tag him, you could because you have that luxury. They also have Emmanuel Ogbah over there who's coming off his second consecutive 9-sack season. And so you can't tag two guys. You probably are going to tag Gesicki. But if they have worked something out with Gesicki, maybe you tag Ogbah as well to make sure that he doesn't walk. Again, there's no reason that this Miami Dolphins team can't keep both of those guys. And certainly if there is a pecking order, Gesicki would be at the top of that. But they have the space, they have the luxury of keeping their top talent while also adding. That's been the point that they've been trying to do under Chris Greer is assemble draft picks, use those draft picks in a smart way, and create cap space. They have all of those things. They are absolutely, if they don't already have something worked out with Gesicki and his reps, they will certainly tag him here in the future.
I want to keep a guy that has the receptions, receiving yards, and receiving TDs. We just saw in that graphic there, top 10. That's a good weapon for Tua moving forward. All right, JJ and B-Mac, don't go anywhere. We got a little bit more coming up. But, of course, the conversation continues On Inside the NFL, you can catch the award-winning Emmy show, of course. James Brown, the fellas, breaking it down, the season finale. Of course, their new episodes Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, exclusively streaming on Paramount+. When we come back, the tag or not the tag will continue with some of those targets. Maybe Mike Williams back in L.A. Dalton Schultz, is he staying in Big D with Jerry and Dak? And how about David Njoku? A very crazy offseason leading to an interesting season. More on that on the other side. One of those, a 27-year-old, spent the first 5 seasons, of course, out in L.A. with the Chargers. Team drafted him 7th overall back in 2017. It's like the Bolts will bring him back in the fold, but they will have some competition. Looking at the 6'4", 218 playmaker they've had in their offense for quite some time. After battling injuries the first few years, and the Chargers, of course, had a breakout campaign in 2021, reaching new career highs in receptions with 76, eclipsing that 1,000-yard mark once again with 1146 and the receiving touchdowns, 9 on the year. A nice little weapon for Justin Herbert and Brandon Staley in that offense. Let's bring JJ back along with Bryant McFadden to break this all down. And JJ, does Mike Williams get the tag? Does he stay in LA or is he going somewhere else here?
Yeah, I think he's very likely going to get the tag. If I had to really say yes or no right now, I would say yes. You just talked about how dudes like him aren't growing off trees. And the fact is he's coming off the best season that he's had in his career. And it's due in part to Brandon Staley. You know, I talked to Brandon Staley back in training camp, and he talked about how they've tried to unlock Mike Williams. For so long, he was just that guy who, hey, run a 9 route, go down there, we're going to throw it up to you, and he's going to win a number of 50-50 balls. Well, he learned more of the route tree once he got with this new coaching staff, and it's paid dividends. And you want to, in the AFC West, of course, keep continuity with your young quarterback in Justin Herbert. And frankly, this wide receiver market isn't all that great. And so if you're the Chargers and you say, yeah, we don't really want to tag you because of his injury history and maybe it's a little bit more than they want to spend on him, okay, well, who are you going to go out there and get instead of him? And so I think a number of market factors are involved here. And because of that, I think we're ultimately going to see the Chargers go ahead and spend that $18.5 million to keep Mike Williams around for at least one more year.
Yo, JJ, I think, you know, the Chargers should try to retain his services, but will they? I'm not quite ready to say that. You look at that tag, if they were to give him a tag, that's almost $20 million, not to mention what Keenan Allen is receiving as well. They're paying Keenan Allen like the number 1 receiver he is. So will they be able to hunker down and say, worst case scenario, Mike, we're going to give you 18.5 per year? I don't know. I think it would make sense based on the relationship, as you mentioned, that he has with their young up-and-coming quarterback in Justin Herbert. Not to mention, when you have Mike Williams doing what he's been doing, now defenses can't focus or put all of their attention on Keenan Allen. If you remove Mike Williams from the fold, more teams can do everything in their power to neutralize Keenan Allen, to say the least. And also, one thing you said that definitely made a lot of sense. This is not a heavy market when it comes to wide receivers that will be available. And with that being said, there are a lot of other teams. If they're not willing to give him that $18 million, there are a lot of other teams in the National Football League will be willing to pay him like the number 1 wide receiver that he has shown the ability that he could be based on what we saw this past season in 2021.
A nice 1-2 punch here, as you mentioned, with Justin Herbert. In Dallas, Dalton Schultz, he hit career highs, of course, with the Cowboys, but they already have more than enough weapons, JJ. And you look at their cap situation, bottom 5, I believe, in the league. Does he stay there in Big D?
I think so. Again, this is a close one. I can see it going either way, but hey, you're coming off an NFC East championship, a disappointing season, no question about it, and they are up against the cap. But if they're going to tag anyone, it is no question going to be Dalton Schultz. You're not going to tag Randy Gregory when you look at his history. You're not going to tag Michael Gallup coming off the ACL. Cedric Wilson, you want to keep him, but he's not necessarily tag worthy. And then Connor Williams up front, he had a really bad year, so you're certainly not going to tag him. So if there is a guy that you're going to tag, it's going to be the 26-year-old tight end who just had 808 receiving yards, and that was coming off a year where he had 615 the year before. So if they do tag someone, it's Schultz. But Brandon, you're right. It's not like they are flush with cap space right now. It might be a difficult one to do, but one I think they ultimately want to get done.
All right, we'll take a look at another tight end here, David Njoku. Look at his situation. 2018, JJ, was his best season. Since then, we're banking on the potential. We still haven't seen it. We know what happened in the offseason. This season was okay. Is he staying in Cleveland based on what we've seen this past year?
I don't feel as good about him getting tagged as all the other guys that we've talked about. But there is a chance. I've talked with sources, and there is a chance that he does get tagged. Really, what Andrew Berry, the general manager of the Cleveland Browns, has to decide is, well, if you're going with Baker Mayfield and he's going to be your guy, frankly, even if you aren't going with Baker Mayfield, if you're trying to attract a veteran free agent or a quarterback that you can acquire via trade, well, who are going to be the receivers that he's going to be throwing to? Who are the pass catchers? Austin Hooper hasn't really panned out so far. You have Jarvis Landry, who's going to be 30. Obviously, it didn't work out with Odell Beckham Jr., and so you do need a reliable target. Would David Njoku be making more money via the franchise tag than he probably would in 2022 if he hit the open market? I do believe that he would, but when I was going through this exercise, I thought there's not really a chance that they're going to tag him, and there is a chance, but I don't think it's ultimately going to happen.
This is a guy that had asked for a trade in the offseason and then just kind of muddled through the season, so we'll see how that pans out for him in Cleveland. Chandler Jones, a little interesting here, turned 32. I was about to say 28. He's 32, but he looked like he was 28 early in the season with those 5 sacks here. Looking for that big payday. Does it happen in AZ for you, JJ?
I don't think so. You know, there's been a lot of contract talk between those two sides, and RJ Silakinfor has been reporting on it for some time now. You know, tagging Chandler Jones is just going to cost them a ton of money. I don't think that the Cardinals ultimately do this. I think it would be a mistake to let him walk, but I don't really know what their other options are. They're really sort of up against it. So I don't see it happening with him. Don't see it happening with Zach Ertz. Think they can ultimately come to a contract agreement with Ertz. But Chandler Jones and the Cardinals, that's been contentious for a while. And again, they're at about -$4 million in cap space right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think Chandler Jones plays elsewhere, and I already have a destination for Chandler Jones. What about going back to where everything all started with the New England Patriots? Pairing him up with Matt Judon would be a nice duo of pass rushers, and that seems to be a thing that Bill Belichick is okay in doing, allowing a guy to walk just to be able to get him back towards the end of his career. I mean, he's a professional sack getter. When you look at his 10-year span, I mean, any season that he's played at least 14 ball games as a full-time starter, he has provided double-digit sacks. You look at what he did in 2019 with that 19-sack season, and then, of course, having 10.5 this season, kind of slowed down outside of getting 5 sacks in the first football game, but he was still able to get the franchise double-digit sacks. This is a guy that still has quality sound years left, especially when you talk about just rushing the passer. He still does that at a high level. I wouldn't be surprised to see him playing for the New England Patriots, but one thing I can tell you, I don't expect to see Chandler Jones playing for the Cardinals this season.
All right, let's keep with the pass rush. Harold Landry, of course, in Tennessee. If you're talking about the pass rush, you got to include him. He had 22 QB hits, 12 sacks, both career highs for him, JJ. Safe to say he's staying in Tennessee with the Titans, right?
Well, maybe, right? Because it's not like, again, they're flush with cap space. And you look at the deal that they gave Bud Dupree. Bud Dupree's counting 9% of their cap. And you know, that's hard. If you're going to pay Harold Landry that franchise tag, that's a whole lot of money you got tied up at outside linebacker when this is a team that has some other needs. And listen, they want to keep Harold Landry. And I think the great thing about the Tennessee Titans is there was a report out there from a couple months ago that they had already been discussing a contract extension. It would behoove Harold Landry to go ahead and, well, not sign whatever's on the table, of course, but to sign that long-term deal if it is a fair deal for him and the Tennessee Titans, because of course that would lower the cap hit. That would be the sort of guaranteed large number of the franchise tag. He's not even 26 years old yet. Tennessee Titans have had some misses in the draft. Harold Landry is that dude. You do want to keep him in there. But again, it's a big proposition to ask them to tie up all that money at the outside linebacker position. So hopefully they are closer to that contract extension where they don't have to exercise the tag and be sort of hamstrung by that big number heading into free agency.
Yeah, they should retain his services. He played some of his best football a year ago, double-digit sacks, over 70 total tackles. But when you look at where they are when it comes to contracts, they've already given out defensively. They gave out a lot of money to Bud Dupree, as you mentioned. Harold outplayed Bud Dupree. You look at Danico Autry, they signed from the Indianapolis Colts, gave him a nice contract as well. And eventually they're going to have to pay Jeffrey Simmons. So will they find a way to get it in with Harold Landry? I think it would make sense, but I don't know. And then when you talk about the franchise tag as well, that's a hefty salary to pay for 1 year for one guy. But all in all, the best years are yet to come. He basically showed the organization what type of player he can be. Very, very consistent. And when you can put pressure on the quarterbacks and get sacks, that's always a big need for organizations. So hopefully Tennessee, they do the right thing. Worst case scenario, tag him. But they need to find a way to keep him in a Tennessee Titans uniform.
Titans have some decisions to make. The Buccaneers have some decisions to make. That running back tour didn't go as well like we thought it was going to be. And this year, they can't keep everybody from last year's team. But, JJ, I want to do something a little different here. If we're looking at Ryan Jensen and Carlton Davis, which is staying in Tampa based on their cap situation?
Yeah, I don't know. And in talking with sources, it could go either way. Neither one of them could get tagged. When you look at Tampa Bay's salary cap situation, they have about however much money you have in your wallet, Brandon. That's how much cap space they have right now.
Of course, $2.
It's roughly that. Now, they can restructure. They can get up to $65 million and all of that. But right now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have to figure out what they're doing at the quarterback position, because if they're going with Kyle Trask, some of these names that we're seeing right there, they're probably going to leave for greener pastures. If they actually acquire a veteran quarterback, as they are rumored to be doing homework on, then maybe you can convince some of these guys on this list to stick around. But of course, if you do acquire one of those veteran quarterbacks, you're also going to be acquiring his cap hit. And so do you have the $17 or so million in immovable funds to pay Carlton Davis, who is a #1 corner, or to pay Ryan Jensen, who's been a solid center for them, who has been very durable? You want to retain both of these guys, but you can only tag one of them, and I'm not sure that they have the cap flexibility if they bring in another quarterback to actually keep both of them. Now, if they do bring in that veteran, well, I think that you would probably target Ryan Jensen just because of the lack of centers that are out there, because of his durability, because you want to keep your quarterback upright. You saw how great and how well he did for Tom Brady the past 2 years. I know that means that Carlton Davis probably has to walk, and I hate saying it, but maybe that's the case.
Yeah, I think so. I think Carlton Davis probably will be playing elsewhere, and I think he can get more money playing elsewhere. They're not allowing Ryan Jensen to go. He means too much to whoever the quarterback may be, not to mention the nastiness that he plays with. He's a guy that's always utilizing his motor, and he does a great job. He is the bully of that offensive line. And Bruce Arians and B left, Byron Leftwich, they love that style of play when it comes to offensively in the trenches. So whoever the quarterback is, we know how important that center how important the center is to the quarterback. So I think just trying to keep some type of continuity there with the offensive line, also making life a little easier for the quarterback, is a bigger priority than trying to keep.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.